Soulja Boy, whose real name was Benjamin, was born in Pennsylvania on September 19, 1919. The official backstory of Soulja Boy by Vought was that he was born poor and learned the values of hard work, tenacity, and bravery while growing up on the streets. But in reality, Benjamin was born into a wealthy home, raised by his father, a prominent industrial magnate who owned half the steel mills in the state. But despite his wealth, Ben's father was incredibly harsh, demanding, oppressive, verbally abusive, misogynistic, distant, and neglectful to the point of total detachment in his son's life. He was so detached from his son that he sent him to boarding school at a young age, not to mold him into a better person, but rather to get rid of him, which left the child feeling abandoned and neglected. Unfortunately, Benjamin struggled in boarding school and ultimately flunked out because of his issues with abandonment and discipline. In reaction to his failure, his father was so disgusted that he couldn't even bother to hit him since that would require physical contact. Instead, he belittled and demeaned his son, deeming him a disappointment to his eyes and declaring that he was worthless to carry his name. These words marked him for life. The tough situation he was in pushed him to start drinking heavily. To cope with his emotions, he began sneaking sips of his father's well-crafted Manhattan cocktails. Over time, this secret habit evolved into a full-blown drinking problem, all driven by the need to find some relief from the emotional burden he carried. To make his father proud, Benjamin enlisted in the US Army during World War II and approached the War Department to volunteer among other human subjects to be experimented with Dr. Frederick Vought's field-tested Compound V. As a result, the experiment succeeded and he became one of the strongest super soldiers in the whole world. He gained the name Soulja Boy and became America's first superhero, a popular sex symbol and a mascot for Vought American and the US military who fought in World War II and led the 116th Infantry Regiment in the Omaha Beach to victory. However, according to the legend's claims, Vought American utilized Soulja Boy primarily for war propaganda films and publicity shoots rather than deploying him to fight the Nazis, due to how much he was worth to the company, and they refused to put their most valuable asset in harm's way by overstepping his boundaries. It remains uncertain how much actual combat he experienced during the war, despite his own claims of actively participating, which could be valid given his exceptional combat skills that could also stem from the US military's or Vought's superhero combat training program. In 1945, following the end of World War II, an executive order was drafted, presumably by President Harry S. Truman, to establish the date of April 28th as Soulja Boy Day, as a way of honoring his heroic efforts during the war. However, he intervened and had the day be known as National Superhero Day, as a way of honoring all superheroes instead. He returned home to a hero's welcome, with ticker parades held across the nation in his honor. Despite all he's accomplished, his father once again expressed his disgust towards his son by calling him a cheater that took a shortcut by using Compound V, something a real man will never do according to his logic. Soulja Boy remained a major superhero with Vought for decades. In 1951, Vought released a pseudo-biopic film about Soulja Boy titled The Soulja Boy Story. It was nominated for Best Picture at the 24th Academy Awards but lost to an American in Paris. At some point, he met Stormfront during her time as Liberty, as the two of them founded Herogasm together in 1952. Other claims from the legend state that Soulja Boy wasn't a true hero due to performing several black ops and committing atrocities for Vought and the US government between the 60s and 1970s. For instance, he brutalized and silenced civil rights activists with fire hoses during the 1963 Birmingham protests and massacred several anti-war demonstrators during the 1970 Kent State shootings. It has even been rumored that he was the man who assassinated President John F. Kennedy. During the 1970s, Soulja Boy would also become the leader of the superhero team Payback, where he would fight crime alongside Crimson Countess, Gunpowder, Swatto, Mindstorm, Black Noir, and the TNT Twins. In the fall of 1980, Jonah Vogelbaum called Benjamin to his lab and asked him to ejaculate his sperm into a cup so that they could study his genetics. Unbeknownst to Soulja Boy, Vogelbaum would use his sperm to create a baby, who would eventually grow up to be Homelander. According to newspapers, Soulja Boy was a brutal vigilante responsible for various violent crimes that he got away with. At some point, he decimated a drug cartel where he employed lethal force on 20 criminals and maimed dozens more. There were also accusations of Soulja Boy pressing brutal force on teenagers whose families later suspected that he forced false confessions from them. These links also lead to civilian casualties. At some point during the 1980s, Soulja Boy came across a group of kids trying to boost a Benz during nighttime. A scuffle ensued, during which the suspects attempted to flee, leading Benjamin to pick up the Benz and hurl it through a nearby house owned by the Milk family, killing Marvin Milk's grandfather in the process. The entire incident was witnessed by Marvin Milk, who was only a boy at the time. However, according to the official account given by Soulja Boy to the press, the suspects attempted to run him over with the car, forcing him to deflect the oncoming vehicle and cause it to crash into the Milk family home. During his period as a public celebrity, he has been a successful actor and singer regardless of the quality of his performances. In 1984, Soulja Boy filmed an anti-drug that was approved by the Vought Ad Council. In the PSA, Ben warned people against taking drugs, claiming that anyone who takes drugs is a loser. However, he had several complications on set due to his spoiled attitudes and quick temper, and also remarked on his hypocrisy in making an anti-drug video despite the fact that he himself was an addict. In the same year, despite being publicly against drugs, Vought had Soulja Boy and the rest of Payback participate in Operation Charlie, a clandestine CIA military operation that was funded by illegal cocaine trafficking and sought to back the right-wing Nicaraguan Contras against the communist Soviet-backed Sandinistas. During the operation, Soulja Boy displayed a carefree yet arrogant and misogynistic attitude towards the handling officer, then Lieutenant Army Colonel Grace Mallory. He would make numerous passes at Mallory before she finally rebuffed him, and he reacted by calling her homophobic slurs. Later on, due to Swatto's carelessness, the Sandinistas and their Soviet allies were able to launch a surprise attack on Mallory's base. This, along with Payback's incompetence and lack of training, led to the deaths of 116 of Mallory's men and allowed the Soviets to somehow neutralize Soulja Boy, whom they then captured and transported to a secret military compound in the USSR. So, despite presenting themselves as a close-knit team, the truth was that Ben was hated by the other members of Payback, as he sabotaged any efforts by them to advance their careers and would frequently physically abuse them. At one point, he even delivered a severe beating to Black Noir, who had complained about Soulja Boy ruining his chance to appear in Beverly Hills Cop. One day, Stan Edgar approached Noir and told him that they felt it was time to retire Soulja Boy, as Vought had created a child whom they believed to be more powerful and useful to the company. Noir agreed, knowing that the rest of the team would be more than willing to help take down their hated leader. So, Payback used the Soviet attack as an opportunity to betray Soulja Boy. After fighting through swarms of enemies, Benjamin soon found himself ambushed by his teammates, who launched a brutal attack against him. Although he put up a good fight, even managing to burn off some of Noir's face with a burning car and cause him brain damage with his shield, The team was successful in knocking Soldier Boy out by using Novichok gas, and then handed him over to the Russians. Vought covered up his death by claiming that Soldier Boy had died as a hero by sacrificing himself to stop a nuclear meltdown in Ohio. What no one in the US knew was that the Russians had decided not to kill Soldier Boy, or maybe they found out that they couldn't kill him. So, instead, the Soviet Union decided to see what could kill Soldier Boy. On January 24, 1986, Russian scientists performed an experiment on Soldier Boy that included inserting radioactive material into his body, which would cause him to emit high levels of radiation from that point on. The scientists also fire an AK-47 into Soldier Boy's mouth and burn him with a torch, all of which fails to damage him. Other experiments intended to harm Soldier Boy included sulfuric acid cocktails and other poisonous concoctions, presumably along with various other exploratory procedures. He was also recorded and experimented on by Russian scientists on June 8, 1986. In this video, a scientist states that the subject has extremely durable skin, including internally, and that he continues to exhibit high amounts of radiation. He prepares to see if the same applies to his cornea by raising a blade up to his eye, but Soldier Boy escapes his restraints and kills the scientist. In an attempt to escape, he runs for the door but is immediately knocked unconscious when the Russians flood the room with gas. Later, when on a mission in Russia, the boys broke into a military facility where they were looking for the rumored superweapon to kill Homelander. Butcher opened up a sealed pod and found inside laid Soldier Boy, alive and hooked up to several plugs. Soldier Boy woke up with a confused look as he freed himself from his restraints. He walked out of the container while the boys looked on in shock. While Frenchie attempted to reassure him, the latter's chest began to glow. Sensing what happens next, Kimiko pushed Frenchie aside before Soldier Boy involuntarily released a blast of fiery energy from his torso at Kimiko, launching her through the nearby wall. While they were distracted with Kimiko, Soldier Boy exited through the hole and escaped from the facility, ignoring any further contact with the boys. After having fled the Russian facility, Soldier Boy stole a pair of clothes and eventually stuck into an airport and illegally boarded a passenger plane bound for America. Soon, he arrives and wanders the streets of modern-day New York City with confusion, as he no longer recognizes the society he was separated from for decades. As he walks down the street of Manhattan, Soldier Boy hears Russian music on a nearby radio and begins to remember the torture and experiments he endured in Russia. Overwhelmed by his trauma, Soldier Boy's powers activated and he released a deadly explosion of radiation, killing 19 civilians and damaging several nearby buildings. With no places to go, Soldier Boy visits the legend to retrieve his old suit and to get information about his girlfriend, Crimson Countess. Before he arrives at her trailer, the boys intercept his plan and bind Countess. Soldier Boy then arrives with his suit and talks with Butcher. Billy negotiates with Soldier Boy, allowing him to confront the bound Countess in exchange for a team-up. Soldier Boy seemingly agrees and enters the trailer. Countess is shocked to see him alive. He confronts her for betraying him and letting him be captured by the Russians. Shocked to hear she wasn't paid to do it, Soldier Boy laments his love for her and says that despite his torture, he was always hopeful that she would rescue him. Countess reveals that she never loved him and that the whole team hated him. Enraged and heartbroken, Soldier Boy releases a blast of energy that kills Countess and destroys her trailer. Soldier Boy walks out of the wreckage and leaves, with Butcher and Huey following behind. The three regroup at a motel and negotiate the terms of their alliance. Butcher and Huey agree to give Soldier Boy information about his former teammates, and once he has his revenge, Soldier Boy will use his powers to kill Homelander. While Butcher is out to get the location for the TNT twins, Huey helps Soldier Boy adjust to the new world with GPS and the internet. While they watch TV, Huey notices that as Soldier Boy grows more agitated, he starts emitting more and more radiation. He then rants about the US's failure in Afghanistan and how he got nothing for his sacrifices except abandonment. Huey then asks about what Soldier Boy did in Midtown Manhattan. Soldier Boy states he doesn't know because he blacked out and only saw the aftermath, but he's remorseful nonetheless. Butcher then arrives coated in someone else's blood and informs them the TNT twins are in Vermont. Soldier Boy suits up while Huey and Butcher inject themselves with V24. They arrive at the twins' house when they are hosting the 70th annual Herogasm. The three stake out the mansion and map out a plan. Concerned about collateral damage, Huey wants them to give him 3 minutes to locate the twins before they enter the mansion. But when Huey gets distracted by A-Train and is spotted by Annie, Butcher and Soldier Boy enter on their own. Mother's Milk then notices Soldier Boy and attempts to incapacitate him with halothane gas, but he only casually breathes it in. Regardless, MM confronts Soldier Boy about his family, but Butcher intervenes and tells him where the twins are, getting him to take his attention away from MM. Soon, Soldier Boy confronts the twins, with them both stating they weren't the ones who planned his capture. Soldier Boy demands to know who was responsible for the plan. They tell him it was Noir's plan, but he is in disbelief because Noir is too loyal to Vought to do something like this. Soldier Boy then hears Russian music on Love Sausage's nearby radio, reminding him of his trauma. The twins attempt to attack him as Soldier Boy struggles, but their powers fail. He then unleashes a devastating beam of energy at the twins and turns around, damaging more of the mansion. Dozens of soups and humans lie horrifically burned, wounded, or killed by the destruction. Soldier Boy regroups with Butcher. He states he blacked out during the attack and doesn't know what fully happened. Then, Homelander confronts them, having been lured by the destruction. Enraged at Butcher for cheating, Homelander calls off their deal and incapacitates Butcher with his heat vision. Homelander admits that Soldier Boy was his idol growing up, as he was the only one who was nearly as strong as him. But he incites Homelander by calling him nothing more than a knockoff. Homelander flies at Soldier Boy, pins him to a wall, and attempts to unleash his heat vision. However, Soldier Boy uppercuts Homelander, causing him to miss his attacks. The pair start trading blows, with both appearing to be evenly matched. However, Homelander does eventually overpower Soldier Boy and begins choking him. Butcher then recovers and attacks Homelander with his own heat vision. Soldier Boy recovers as Butcher and Homelander face off against each other. The two reach a stalemate with their heat vision until Benjamin grabs Homelander's cape and throws him into a wall. The two beat Homelander until he tosses Soldier Boy aside and begins choking Butcher. Huey then teleports inside and punches Homelander off Butcher. With Homelander distracted, Butcher and him overpower him, pinning him to the ground. Huey teleports back to help them as Butcher orders Soldier Boy to unleash another energy blast. As he charges up, Butcher orders Huey to leave, but he refuses. Desperate to survive, Homelander unleashes an adrenaline-fueled scream as he breaks free from their grasp before flying upwards and retreating. With his target having escaped, Soldier Boy exits the mansion as Butcher and Huey receive disappointed looks from MM and Annie. Later, he and the boys continue to track down Mindstorm, seeking to kill him. As they approach Mindstorm's cabin, Soldier Boy warns them not to make eye contact with Mindstorm or they'll be put in an endless nightmare. As they continue, he steps on a landmine that temporarily incapacitates the trio, long enough for Mindstorm to trap Butcher in a nightmare before fleeing to his cabin. When they recover, Huey is distraught over Butcher's condition and pleads with Soldier Boy to help him have Mindstorm wake Butcher. He refuses, insisting that it isn't worth the risk and Butcher would want them to continue even without him. Huey and Soldier Boy advance further until they stumble upon a priest and nun with car trouble. When they were revealed to be mind-controlled by Mindstorm, Soldier Boy executes them both. Huey begins to panic at his callous nature and accuses him of being a fraud, prompting Soldier Boy to punch Huey after angrily chiding him about losing sight of the mission. Nonetheless, the two eventually stumble upon Mindstorm's cabin. They enter and Soldier Boy notices Mindstorm hiding around the corner. Before he can do anything, Huey teleports himself and Mindstorm to Butcher's body to make a deal. If Mindstorm wakes Butcher up, Huey will teleport him anywhere he wants to go. After Butcher awakens, Soldier Boy finds them and throws a knife into Mindstorm's eye. As the soup panics, he tackles Mindstorm and wraps his head in cloth. Huey attempts to intervene, only to have Soldier Boy hit him again, this time hard enough to send him flying back. Soldier Boy then interrogates Mindstorm about more details on Payback's plan to have the Russians capture him, to which Mindstorm tells him that Vought gave them the green light to get rid of him because a newer, younger soup was being brought up to replace him. Shocked, Soldier Boy kills Mindstorm in a rage before coming to a realization. Later, he calls Homelander and tells him that the situation has changed, giving Homelander an anecdote about a sperm donation he made in late 1980 in Jonah Vogelbaum's lab. In spring 1981, a baby was born from that donation, who was Homelander. He concludes their call by saying that, had he been allowed to stay, he would have gladly let himself be replaced by Homelander. Soldier Boy drives with Billy Butcher to New York to track down Black Noir at Vought headquarters. Once they arrive in the city, he opens up to Butcher about his past, his father, and how he became a superhero, but that his father wasn't even impressed because he took a shortcut. He tells Butcher that he always wanted kids. Butcher emphasizes that Homelander isn't really his son because he didn't raise him. At Vought Tower, Homelander informs him that he already killed Noir and he just wants to talk. Homelander states the situation to Soldier Boy, that he is his son, his blood, and together no one will stand in their way. Soldier Boy isn't convinced and threatens to kill Homelander first. Homelander then brings out Ryan and introduces him to his grandson. Benjamin tells him he wishes he raised him so that he could be better. Homelander assures him they can be a family, but Soldier Boy remarks that Homelander is unredeemable and a disappointment. He then grabs Homelander by the throat as Maeve and Butcher restrain Homelander, but Ryan lasers down Soldier Boy with his heat vision before he can finish charging up. Soldier Boy then knocks Ryan unconscious with his shield. Homelander tries to help him while Soldier Boy begins charging up his nuclear blast. Soldier Boy prepares to blast Ryan and Homelander, so Butcher attacks him with his heat vision, which he blocks with his shield. However, Homelander suddenly adds his own heat vision to the assault, which sends Soldier Boy flying into the next room. As Maeve distracts Homelander, Butcher follows Soldier Boy, telling him to back off. But he repeats Butcher's earlier comment about blood not mattering, but Butcher explains that Ryan is his wife's son and he promised to always protect her son. Feeling betrayed, Soldier Boy announces that Butcher is just as weak as Homelander and attacks. Soldier Boy manages to overpower Butcher in combat, and even with the sudden arrival of Starlight, the female, Huey and Mother's Milk, he continues to dominate the fight. Eventually, Huey sees an opening and turns up the power for the room's lighting systems. This sudden increase in electricity overcharges Starlight as she unleashes an energy attack and knocks Soldier Boy to the ground. It gives the others enough time to subdue him and for MM to dose Soldier Boy with Novichok. Refusing to be imprisoned once again, Soldier Boy begins charging a particularly devastating blast and breaks free from their grasp. As he's about to explode and kill everyone around him, Maeve tackles Soldier Boy and ends up jumping out the window with him as he explodes, saving everyone else and sacrificing herself. However, Maeve survived and went into hiding with her girlfriend, while an unconscious Soldier Boy is recovered by Grace Mallory and put back into a gassed capsule. Later, Soldier Boy appears at Kate's imaginary friend, saying that she had a crush on him when she was young and was thinking about him when she used the pillow for pleasuring herself. He warns Mary, Jordan, and Andre to escape before she enters a vegetative state and then disappears before he could tell the most important thing for them to escape. So yeah, that's all from Soldier Boy that we got to see so far.